different splines. That's not a big thing. If that's what he means, I'm not sure. So let's go ahead and load one of the git bash objects. To make all of the points level, can you scale them? If you run into the problem that some of your points are on a different height level, I think the best way to level them is to click on them and just go into the object tab and just zero them. Like click and click. Now I think I created more chaos than I wanted. Yeah, these splines are so difficult to work with. I think you understand what I wanted to say there. Move them up again. So if you want to level all of your points, just use the same value for every point. So that way you can make them all go into the same height level within the scene. So yeah, the train. Let's go for the train now. And for that, let's use one of the objects. I think I have 3 objects I want to use for the train. That's this one and this one and this one. All right. Now, once again, they are far too large, so let's scale them down. Rotate it. Let's place it on one of these tracks. Down. Now let's deactivate those. And okay, that's that one. Let's go with this one first. And now this part here is perfect to kind of use as some sort of object that wraps around the train track, at least to a certain extent. Where are we? There we are. Let's make it a little and move it down. Create a copy of that one. Mirror it perfectly straight here for some reason. Okay. Take these two, make them again smaller. Down a bit. If we can make this a little better, yeah. So this alone could practically work, at least in in the background as some sort of train. Let's go with this object and rotate this as well. This could be used as a cockpit element for the train. And that's generally how kit bashing works. You just load some objects in and place them and see what happens. A little bit like concept art when you work with custom brushes and you just start doodling and suddenly you see something, and from there it goes along, and in the end you have a kind of finished artwork with a landscape or creature or something. Now let's incorporate this object. Check it out a bit. And yeah, here we go. Now, this doesn't look super amazingly sexy, but I think it would do a great job as a train, at least for a background element. Of course, when you go for foreground elements, you need much more detail, and kit bashing for stuff in the foreground certainly doesn't always work. Now let's group this and create a copy. Rotate this and it's not completely straight for some reason. But however, you guys understand what I'm going for here. And there we have something that looks almost like some kind of futuristic train. Now these objects, like I said yesterday, some of them have are mapped to a certain extent. So for this cockpit element, let's zoom in. We can add materials to different parts of the cockpit, and for this element here as well. Let's cycle through these mapped areas. So there you can apply different materials to bring in additional variation. So we not have the same material on all over the object. That definitely helps to add additional detail. Now let's deactivate the demo stuff and activate the stuff that was added and worked out correctly. And here we have our train. And number 1. Now, what's it doing now? Then by hand. So here we are. Let's do a quick test render of this one, and that's our kit bashed train. And I think it definitely works for what it's supposed to do. And now, like I said, what we can do now is, since we worked with a reference of our main terrain, let's render this one quickly. And it's a little dark for some reason. Anyway, here you can see these train tracks, and they have the correct scale. Now what we can do is to simply select our trains and our splines, Control C them, and load our big scene file, and Control V them, and they are placed correctly in the scene. All you have to do is to adjust the height of the train tracks and the train, and then you have it in your main scene. Now we had a question, I think yesterday, if it's possible to use this spline tool to create walls in a terrain. Now let me just show that quickly. I know time runs away. All right.
Yeah, this is going to be a good tip, though. I think it's very much worth showing.
Yep. So let's again create a line here and enable terrain effects. And okay, let me just for this terrain, and okay this, and now let's find that terrain. Here we go. Now you can see I added these points, the points of the spline on top of this terrain, and the points accurately place on the terrain depending on where you click. So that's definitely helpful. But if you have a terrain, an underlying terrain, but you want to add a spline for like we just did train tracks, then the points would orientate themselves on the terrain, and you would have these height differences between these points. This one is a little lower than this one, and so on. So that can be a little tricky, and therefore going in and adjusting the z value for these points to all the same value for all points would probably, or not probably, would even out the height of these points. Same probably for the anchor points. But anyway, creating a wall. Now double click to open this spline editor again. What it does now is to create a path, a curved out path in the terrain, but that's actually not what we want. We want something that goes higher. Now this tool can be used to create roads, for example, roads that go along on a terrain. And let's do a quick render. Doesn't look too amazing. Let's try to adjust this filter. So it's not exactly a wall. Now we can go with a height of 50 meters, but this is a value field that allows you to go even higher, but you have to type in the value. And there are a couple of fields in view that allow you to go higher than the actual slider allows. Not all of them, but some of them. But here we go. I think this could be used as a wall or something. So I hope that answers the question from yesterday. And let's move on. Now, point 2.5b, the kit bashing we have just done, creating the hover train. And now we go into the next point, refining and polish of the scene. Now, are there any more questions regarding the train tracks and the kit bashing?
Just a comment from Mark. He mentions you could duplicate the train and lace in other points on the spline too and make it like a busy subway as an idea.
For example, yeah.
So no other questions at the moment.
Okay, so too bad because I have to load another file. All right. Okay, let me explain what we are going to do now. We imported these terrains or the height fields we created with JSPlacement, and some of the patterns and lines that go through the terrain might intersect with some of the buildings in the scene, especially our hero building. And to get rid of these parts in the height field, we can go into Photoshop and manipulate that height field to create a hole in that part, and so these lines don't go through our building. And let's just check this out, as well as adding some additional detail to our hero building. Now, to answer Catherine's question, these kitbash models, I just posted the link for them a couple of minutes ago. Let me post it again. Can be found here. They are free. And some great stuff there. I played around with it the past couple of weeks, and can only recommend to download it. You probably have to register yourself on Gumroad, but it's well worth it. And the buildings are from Stonemason. He sells these cityscape building packages on the DAS shop, and they are not very expensive and certainly well worth checking out. And okay, now we are in our scene again, and we can see that we have our train tracks here, and right there going through the scene and leading the eye at least a little bit through the landscape. And the problem with the terrain I just mentioned. Let's create a quick render here. And as you can see, this terrain element goes straight through the building, and this certainly doesn't look very good. So what can we do about it? Now, first of all, let's open up the terrain or the image file that is used for the terrain in Photoshop. And where is it? One. All right. Now to find exactly the spot where our buildings are, and to find the spot we want to work with, because in all this chaos we cannot really identify the exact area. What I missed to show with the train tracks, let's just do this here. Create a quick render of the scene, and I actually missed to deactivate two top layers because only need the bottom layer and the text layer 1 layer. Deactivating this one, so we have good reference. Now let's try this. So we can use this top view as a reference, and that works. Now we use the print screen button and create a screenshot of our screen and Control V to import it, and let's go in there and cut this out so we have a reference. And now stretch it over the terrain file. And now we can, at least to a certain point, identify what we have to work on. And that's these lines right there, because here we can see that these lines go straight through our main building. And let me switch to my Wacom pen. What we can do now is fairly easy. Just use a brush with 100% hardness, and in the brush settings, uncheck transfer if that's active, because we don't want this to be transparent. And pressing Alt to sample the color, and then just go in and overpaint the lines we want to get rid of in the terrain. So that's pretty straightforward how to do this. And that's how you can easily manipulate the terrain files. You can do that, of course, in GIMP as well, or whatever editing software you're using to do your post work. And without going into too much detail here, let me load the file where I have fixed this already, so you understand what I've done there. All right, that's the area where I deleted these lines. And I've worked with 3 layers there, and created also this bow to frame the tower a little bit. And here again, the reference image. So, and that can be saved as PNG, and then we go into our tech layer 2 terrain, and to the graph texture map. Then I have saved this as fixed PNG and drag that on here. And let's go back into the terrain editor. And right here we can see that this area is cut out now. Then we OK this. back here and let's take a look. Now it has to shuffle in all the new terrain data into the memory again. So the preparation for the preview render takes a bit. And here we go. Now we have this cut out, and the building stands on its own and has no interfering terrain elements that go through the windows or the side of the building. So that's how you can fairly easy manipulate the terrain maps if something comes up and something doesn't look the way you want it. And any questions about that?
There was a comment from Sean saying the healing brush may work well in some situations.
Yes, the healing brush, the stamp tool, stuff like this. But if you really want to go as accurate as possible, just use a simple brush, sample the colors, and just paint into the terrain. That's probably the best. At least when it comes to these artificial-looking circuit board terrains, where you need to be as accurate as possible. When it comes to natural terrains like mountains and landscapes, then a healing brush and stamp tool can work too, of course.
Okay, Brian asks, what happened to the background building eco?
Now the background building eco is still there. I just deactivated it here.
Yeah.
And let's just do a quick render.
Oh yeah, somebody asked for a render of the train as well. They wanted to see what that looked like.
Sure, one second.
Yeah.
And here we go with the background cityscape.
Oh yeah, there we go.
And the train, right here. And right there. All right, so that's how you can manipulate the terrains. And now let's add some additional detail to our hero building. And for that, I go in and load one of the objects of the 200 pieces free assets package again, since these are just too much fun. And all right. Much too big again. Now, what I want to do now is to, let me switch the camera. I want to add some additional detail to this face of the building, since it looks very flat, and some additional stuff there certainly helps to break the monotone look of it. So this still looks a little Too big. Let's. Damn it. All right. Try this. Let's create a copy of this. And move this up. Okay, let's do a quick render to see how it looks. Now these objects suffer the same problem like the other ones we imported because they look a little too soft. Let's go down to 30 there for this one as well. Also, the material looks a little too dark. Let's just go into the hero building and copy this concrete texture and apply this here. Or let's see, what have we here? Try this material 1 and paste. Another quick render. And this looks pretty cool. The side of the building doesn't look as flat anymore. Now can create some more copies and do the same for this area up here. And we have something that at least to a certain extent has a more individual look and more detail facing the camera. Try a render here. And we have some detail here on the side of this hero building that breaks up the detail, the flat appearance of the building quite nicely, and yeah, helps to just add more detail to the overall appearance of this building. Now we could go in and add additional detail to some other parts of this building as well. But I think we understand what the purpose of this is. So we could move on. And any questions regarding the kit bash and additional detail element of this hero building and the refining and polishing of the terrain?
Any questions, folks, on that last section? Okay, don't forget we've got our competition question at the end. We're 1 hour 35 into the webinar now.
Now the question, Paul, is I have a couple of things left and I would probably need another hour to explain this. How do we approach this?
Okay, if you choose the most important knowledge first, and what we may have to do is create an offline recording and send it out to the to those registered. What chunks do we have left? I know we've got the Photoshop section.
Now, I think what the guys want to see most is the cloud modulation part, because that's the most interesting part that's left.
Yeah.
What I also have left is how to add some additional trees to certain parts of the terrain, and yeah, the Photoshop part, and how to prepare the scene for the render. So there is some stuff left.
Yeah. Now we're getting a kind of a vote coming through the chat. So quite a few people are saying the fog and the clouds.
Yeah. So let's just do this cloud modulation thing.
Yeah.
No big deal. How do I go now? Yeah. For the cloud modulation, what I originally did was to check out YouTube, because I remembered that Eon created a video when they freshly implemented this cloud modulation option into Vue, and that was recorded with the old function editor, and to translate that into the new function editor did cost me an afternoon to figure it out, but I managed to understand it, and I found this feature quite useful, and I've used it on a couple of projects now. Now let me just show you what cloud modulation actually does. Cloud modulation allows you to take a cloud layer and make it hug. Let's just say hug the underlying terrain, and this can create some really cool effects, and especially when you want to create some low fog, ground level fog that is not created by the atmosphere editor. And this mountain was created with World Machine and GeoCliff 2, and that was the experiment, or the terrain I played around with when I tried to learn how cloud modulation works. So that's the example, and let's go in and load our example scene for this. Now this will load a bit again. What we are doing for the cloud modulation for this scene is again a little bit tricky, because we have all these different terrains laid out throughout the scene, and what we are doing is again trying to create. We try to create a new height field, so to say, that we will adjust to the size of the terrains we already have in our scene. It's a little. It sounds more complicated than it actually is, but it can be a little time consuming. But everything with clouds is time consuming. So let's go with the here. No. Let me load this height field. So this is the height field I'm using for the cloud modulation, and as you can see, it resembles the terrains we have in our scene. These are the four main terrains, with the lower left one as our focus terrain that is quite right in front of our camera, and these are the background terrains, and that's the height field we will use to give our cloud modulation an orientation where to put the clouds and at what level. And okay, we have these terrains there. Now here we have this already included. So let's just create a quick render so we can see how the clouds look. Now I deactivated the background terrains from the render and only activated the bottom terrain, our base terrain. And you can already see now it takes ages for the clouds to render, but you can see that the cloud layer orientates itself on the shape of the height field we gave it as an orientation. And let me just abort this. Now what we do is we basically create a reference render again that we can use for our Photoshop file, and this reference render is basically this one. We can see the bigger terrains right there, and here our smaller terrains in the foreground. And what we do is we load our height fields that we used for our base terrain layer. We load that into this PSD file and adjust these height fields to the size we have in our reference, and that we save as an separate height field, this one, and that is loaded into our cloud modulation thing. And for the cloud modulation, let's delete what we had there and let's create a new cloud layer. And what's commonly used for cloud modulation is the dense cumulus layer. Let's load this, and then we go into the options, and there we activate the altitude offset and the height modulation in the function graph. Now let me bring in some order here. Okay, we don't need this one and we don't need this one. Now we need to load the map to object node, and that one comes, I think, with the extra CD or the extra material package that comes with Vue. And you probably, if you haven't downloaded it yet, you need to download it. And that contains the map to object node. And this is connected to nothing there yet. Then we need a map to object and a texture map. Now this map to object node needs to be connected to the texture map, and the texture map needs to be connected to the altitude and to the height. And this is a packaged graph which there's a specific term that I can't remember right now, but it contains several other nodes, and in that node we click the external dependency and link that to the now we can't link it yet because we haven't imported the terrain yet. So now first the terrain that contains the height field that we use to tell the cloud modulation where to put the clouds. Zero this out. Let's go with 4K again. Now it loads, and let's go with 100%. Now it takes a while again to load the extra dialog. I really have no idea why this always takes that long to load. Here we go, and it always opens beneath the terrain editor. Now we load our saved height field and OK this and OK this. And what we do now is to make this height field invisible because we don't need it directly in the scene. We only need it to serve as a orientation for our cloud layer. Now let's go back into the function. Go to the map to object and edit. And in the external dependency, in the upper one, we go terrain number 7 is the one we imported for this endeavor, and click there position, and for the lower one we go to size. And now let's try what this does. Now let's move this down and make it slimmer. Try this. Okay, we don't see too much. Now, the interesting thing is that you can regulate the appearance of the clouds via the altitude variation slider. The higher the slider, the less clouds you actually see. And you have to go with very low values here to make this cloud visible. Let's also up the density to 100%. Now this cloud modulation technique can be very tricky, and you might have to try multiple times before you actually get the results you want. Let's move this a little higher. Still nothing. Let's check back here. I'm not sure. Do I need to connect this one to something? I'm really not sure right now. I would have to load the other file again.
DW Max says, notice the altitude was 0. Does that matter?
No, not really, because we wanted to start at 0. And yeah. Yeah, this cloud modulation thing is the part of the webinar I feared the most, because it can be very tricky to get this stuff working. But
okay, let's keep with it. I think the final another final fallback we can do is perhaps load the file where you did have it working.
Yeah,
look at the settings for that.
Yeah, let's try this.
Yeah.
At least I have this this wonderful mountain image that proves I made it. I understood kind of how it works. So still, it can be very, very tricky to get this stuff right.
Yeah, I've got a lot of agreement in the chat box about that. Now, whilst that's loading, shall I give the competition question?
Sure.
Yeah.
So good luck, guys.
Yes. Now this is where the chat box normally freezes because so many people are they're going to be typing in it. Okay, so here's the question. Now Chris mentioned this yesterday, but you can have a fair shot at it because you know you could guess. What for Chris's computer system, give me the correct video RAM and the correct main RAM of his machine. Video RAM and main RAM in terms of gigabytes. Has the chat box frozen already? Yes, it has. Oh my goodness. So if Tiffany and Jeremy might have to assist me here. If I let you know the answers.
I think Tom was the first.
Right, gosh, yeah, my screen is just refreshed. Right, so you think who was first?
I think Tom was the first.
Tom. Okay, right, Tom, if you could confirm your surname to me. So if you just have Tiffany, if you cross-check that answer, make sure that nobody before Tom had the same answer as a check. Gosh, that's certainly frozen my chat. I think it's barely recovering. Yeah. Is Tom Tim? Tom Herbert. Okay. Tom. Okay, yeah. I know. You're one of our regulars. So well done, Tom. Everyone in the room congratulate him.
Congratulations.
I'm sure, I have a feeling he's won another competition, you know. I have a feeling that Tom's got fast fingers. I can't remember, because I'm sure he's been to some of our original conferences in the past where we gave out prizes quite frequently for things like ZBrush.
ZBrush, cool tool.
Yeah, cool prize.
Yeah.
Oh, Tiffany's being Tiffany's being difficult. He didn't say gigabytes. Yeah, he might have meant megabytes. Yeah, I think we'll make that assumption. Right, so I'll organise. I'll get Anna Blanco from Bentley organisation to contact you. She's like the marketing manager for the Eon software, to contact you with all of the licensing details.
To answer DW Max's question, if this can all be done in view complete, I'm not familiar with the capabilities of view complete, so I cannot really tell. But some of this stuff, I don't think so. Everything below view infinite is kind of limited when it comes to certain stuff. So I'm not entirely sure. But Mark says yes, it can. So I'm really not sure. Yeah, when it comes to rendering and multipass rendering, that's probably a problem. That's something I wanted to talk about, but time is running out. And as you can see here in my active camera window, here we have a working cloud modulation thing. And to show you the graph again, this is the graph. I missed to link the map to object to the position node. That's why it probably didn't work properly. And that's basically what I done before. Into the edit, and the upper external dependency, the cloud modulation reference terrain, and the position right there, and the lower external dependency, again the cloud mod reference terrain and the size. So that's the stuff the function needs to define where the clouds appear and where they don't. And let's just to check how it looks, invert this texture and save this one and create another quick test render. And you can see how slow this becomes as soon as clouds are involved. And yeah, it's a little sad. I would work much more often with clouds if there weren't these crazy render times involved.
Hey Chris, could you bring up that settings again? I've got a picture of the function editor. I've got a snapshot of that. Could you give me the option screenshot where it shows the different which one is it?
Yeah, give me a minute. Let's just give the render another.
Yeah.
Just give the render another pass, and then I open it again.
Yeah, give it a chance. Yeah.
So, yeah, you can clearly see that the clouds are taking the reference terrain as a point of orientation, where to put the clouds and where to set the edges and all that stuff. Looks very abstract, but still kind of cool, I think. And it looks definitely more natural than the standard fog stuff you can bring into your scene through the atmosphere editor. But again, rendering this stuff takes forever. Okay, let's abort this render right there and check out that's the not inverted terrain we use for the clouds, and that's the inverted. And here we have the clouds sitting in the valleys. Let's just call it valleys of the terrain, and here they are sitting on top of the terrain. So a lot of fun stuff you can do with this. And here are the settings again. And the advanced settings. And the function settings. And we don't have to change anything in these nodes. We just have to define the reference terrain for the position in the upper external dependency and for the size in the lower external dependency. And that's basically it. And also something to keep in mind, to the appearance of the cloud is highly dependent on the altitude variation slider. You may have to play around with this when trying to work with cloud modulation. The lower the values, at least that's what I got from the video, the better the results, because I think the clouds become a little more thicker. And I don't know if that's true, but yeah, clouds, very, very tricky stuff. Very tricky stuff. But yeah, that basically concludes the cloud modulation stuff. And I may sit down and create a separate video for YouTube someday, but for that I would need some time, especially because of these preview renders.
Yeah, a big thank you to Eon Software as well, Bentley, for sponsoring this particular webinar set that allowed the free entry today. So please give Chris a big thank you for the 4 hours that he's presented today. He spent many more hours in preparing for this session,